I'm Kayla Brown, and I am a game producer on World of Warcraft. I work alongside many of our amazing developers and help shepherd a lot of our features and content from their very early concept stages all the way through to launch when they go live to players. The team and I are really excited to be showcasing Dastardly Duos. We really wanted to aim as a team to focus on creating an experience that was fresh, fast-paced, and a bit zany, wany, and wacky, that our players can really just jump right in and experience that nostalgic factor when battling against some of our classic, old fan favorite bosses. It is a 6-week event, and it is hosted by no other than our good old pal Vinny Sweets. Players will be able to enter into the Dastardly Dome, where they will be able to face off against many of our legendary foes of old in the attempt to kind of get the best high score they possibly can. Players can queue up all on their own. They can kind of lone wolf it if they wish to, or they can queue in with other champions. That could be their friends, guildies, strangers, up to them. To do so, they would go and visit Ciji Bambrick in one of the local event hubs that we have located either in Stormwind, Orgrimmar, or Donegal. So the team really wanted to put their passion into creating something that can kind of be fun and approachable to everybody. We also find a lot of value in creating a space that even just our most casual players can kind of just dive in there and really have a good instant fun moment, while also trying to make sure that we kind of put in there some layers of challenge. We kind of did this with Dastardly by using a lot of those wacky, crazy, zany elements and mechanics. And this way it makes folks have to be a little bit more creative when it comes to how they're going to get their next best high score. People want to keep an eye out because Vinny will be dishing out brand new quests every single week for the duration of the event. And of course, upon completion of these quests, players will be rewarded with really new and exciting loot. Some of that being the Tyranotort mount, as well as the spicy meanball pet, and of course, the illustrious winner's podium, where players will actually be able to utilize it to show off and compare their best high scores with other players.
My name is Pat Nagle. I'm a designer on the World of Warcraft team, specifically the Live Games Initiative section of the World of Warcraft team. So I was the head designer, I suppose, for Dastardly Duos. So I kind of came up with the concept, implemented a lot of it. You know, if being the only designer on it, I had to wear a lot of different hats. So I really like nostalgia. My formative years were kind of in the 1980s, you know, back when there were arcades that were like coin operated. You know, go to a place and you'd play and you'd get a high score and you'd just keep pumping quarters in, trying to get better and better. I wanted to bring that to, to Dastardly Duos. I had some big inspirations from the 80s, like Running Man was a great one. It's kind of a, you know, whimsically dystopian, violent, but sort of fun, you know, movie. The video game Smash TV, that was a huge inspiration. But also things like Thunderdome, just a lot of people into an arena, everyone's watching, kind of like a fun gladiatorial pit. So those were some really big ones. One of the fun parts of Dastardly Duos is that you're fighting multiple bosses at the same time. We're kind of throwing them all into the mix. That was why it was important to choose things like, you know, very distinct silhouettes, to choose mechanics that you could distinguish between the bosses. And even if a certain boss, you know, doesn't have a complicated mechanic, the fact that you're fighting 2 or 3 or 4 bosses at the same time is where that depth comes.
Yes! Victory for our champions!
When we first started building Dastardly Duos, it was group-only content. And in the back of my mind, I knew that, you know, that was like a real blind spot for us. But we were able to use the follower bots. I mean, when you enter the Dastardly Dome with less than 5 players, it will summon the follower bots to kind of fill out your party. So it gave me my 4 friends, and I'm a mage, so it made sure that I had a tank. You can dismiss the followers, and that factors into the score. You're gonna get like a lot more points than if you had the bots. The fact that you can play Dastardly Duos solo is gonna let a lot more people play, I think. We did not worry much about the power level of our power-ups. So we have some that are really, really good for this mode, but you can only use it when you're fighting in Dastardly Duos. So we really leaned into that. Before you start the fight, you can go to the craft service table. There's some food there, and this is where you can decide what power-ups or some of the power-ups you want. Like here's the big beefy burger, it makes you big and strong, take less damage. Cake from a fan, It makes you run real fast. And this works kind of like a loadout. You can only have one food imbibed at once, but there's a second loadout over here for potions. Here's the vial of healing. If you're drinking that, then you kind of regenerate health as you play. The bottle of invisibility, make you turn invisible every time you jump. We wanted to just not constrain like the power level of these power-ups. Almost any idea that as we're doing play tests, I'm thinking like, oh, that's probably something we could do. And I just kind of put it in and we try it out, start the match here. And there's a few different phases. This is the trash phase. You and your followers are gonna fight trash. You want to destroy props because there's things underneath them. Each wave, there's 2 bosses at once. There is certainly a lot of chaos in the fight. And we get that chaos by basically throwing a lot of monsters at the players. You could be fighting 20 or 30 monsters all at the same time, but you have the abilities to do it. And after you've killed 2 rounds of bosses, that's it for the fight. And then you get your end chest. You see your score screen. This is the score I got, 189,000. That would be reflected here. So when you're in front of the podium, it'll tell you a couple things. Your high score and your last score. You can stand on the winner's podium, and if multiple people are standing on it, it will kind of make you jump around. If you have the highest score, you're gonna be at the top. If you have the lowest, you're gonna be at the bottom. Dastardly Duos is accessible to people who might not be the best WoW players, but they can still play and win. However, their score might not be as high as someone who is really good and learns like not only how to play their character really well, but how to use scoring within Dastardly Duos really well. And there's lots of ways you can get double scores, triple scores. It can go up to millions of points if you kind of know not only how to play WoW really well, but how to kind of take advantage of the scoring system. There's a power up where you can eat food that gives you a handicap, but the game knows that you have that handicap, so it gives you extra points. There's new rewards every week, so when you show up, you can play Dastardly Duos and you get a new toy, a mount, the winner's podium. But in addition to that, the content, the bosses that you fight each week, it grows. In that first week, there's only 4 bosses, but by the end, you can fight up to 10. And that was a big part. The kind of increase in bosses each week kind of folds into the scoring system. If you have more things to kill, you're gonna get more points. So we think that players' scores will kind of creep up week after week.
My name is Ciji. I work for the WoW QA team. I'm on the live game team, and I test a lot of the new experimental features, among them Dastardly Duos. So we kind of look at the feature as a whole and break down all the different aspects of it and make sure that all the different parts of it are tested from all of the different groups that we have in QA. One way we kind of approach it is like looking at it from what aspects are new to the game and how do we want to test those, and what aspects already exist, and kind of pull those aspects in for previous testing, as well as developing new test plans about how we want to test a feature that's completely new. One of the foods that we have is the shrimp, and when you eat the shrimp, you kind of shrink down, you do less damage and you take more damage. We would call it shrimping, and so everybody would go in and they'd eat the shrimp and they'd be like these smaller characters and go and try to fight and just see how that would react. I'm gonna have the challenging shrimpy fish. It's gonna shrink me down. Then later on we added another challenging food, the hot dog. So when you eat that, you kind of get indigestion. You get ×2 kill and survival bonus, but sometimes you get gassy and you can knock back the players behind you. So that's kind of like a fun little bit of chaos that we added into the arena. Also, one of the things that we have was the Bullhorn of Calling, and that allows you to summon in an extra boss. So if you want to go for a higher score, you can use this Bullhorn and just pop in another boss at any time. And one of the things our QA UX folks did is they just kept using Bullhorns, right? And so they just keep summoning in bosses. At a certain point, there is a point where you've killed every boss that can possibly summon, so then a wave of adds will come in, and then you get more points from those. And it gets pretty chaotic if you keep using those Bullhorns. So one of the things that we did do was we added a cap so that those can only cap out after you've summoned every single boss, and then a couple waves of ads. We did kind of try to look at like, what's this behavior like? What's a player going to do to try to get this higher score? And it's like, okay, well, you know, we want you to be able to have this chaotic fight, but you don't want it to go on forever and just get like, you know, accumulate score forever and be in the dome. But it still makes for a pretty fun experience when you're sitting there and you don't know if your teammate's going to summon one too, right? You both summon a new boss at the same time. Everything gets pretty hectic. Taming the chaos, but also embracing the chaos.
We're really excited to see all of the high scores really start to roll in, as well as see who kind of hits the tippy top of the winner's podium.